They say her smile could light up Madison Square Garden. Her voice could lift the fevered brow of the dying. Kathryn Kuhlman was a legend in mid-century America, the Pentecostal evangelist whose miracle services drew tens of thousands each week. But when her private diaries, 19 volumes sealed since her death in 1976, were quietly auctioned off by her estate, nobody expected their pages to reveal the messy secrets of the miracle woman. Tonight, we open Kathryn Kuhlman's diary, and what we read will shock you. It began at a simple estate sale in Tulsa. A local collector, hoping to find childhood memorabilia from Kuhlman's early years, bought a stack of unmarked journals thought to be commonplace prayer records. But as he flipped through the first leather-bound volume, he discovered page after page of intimate revelations, dreams she'd never shared on stage, conflicts with her closest associates, and confessions that upend everything we thought we knew about her ministry. Within days, word spread to documentarians and journalists. A single click of a camera shutter, a single signature on an acquisition form, and those 19 diaries passed into the hands of a team ready to decode every hidden margin note. The first shock came in Volume 1, dated 1928. A teenage Kathryn writes of a vision so vivid that she flew above her family home in St. Louis, witnessing far-off cities trembling with need. She describes voices calling her name, as urgent as an alarm bell, demanding that she dedicate her life to healing the sick. But then, on the very next page, she admits to secretly envying her sister's simple life, wondering if this voice is truly God's or my own ambition in disguise. Imagine the steady, assured evangelist we've always seen, confessing doubt so stark it might have broken a lesser soul. Yet she pressed on, concealed by a mask of unshakable faith. By Volume 5, the tone shifts. Entries from the late 1940s reveal tension behind the scenes at her famous Dallas crusades. Kuhlman writes scathing private critiques of her own staff. They filch God's glory for their bank accounts, she fumes, naming key team members and accusing them of greed. Pages later, she recounts how she once staged a healing requiring a hidden cue, whispered signals that triggered choir members to lead the crowd into rapturous applause. She confesses to covering up a botched moment when a man collapsed on stage and refused to rise, fearing the scandal would destroy her ministry's reputation. Perhaps the most unsettling discovery lies in Volume 9. Here, Kathryn details a clandestine relationship with a married businessman who financed her tent revival tours. She describes weekend rendezvous in a hotel suite, passages of longing interrupted by guilt. How can I claim purity of spirit while chasing the flesh of another man? She frames these encounters as tests of devotion, but historian notes pasted alongside suggest the affair ran for 5 years, concurrent with her most successful healing campaigns. For an evangelist so publicly revered for chastity and dedication, those private passions shake the very foundation of her saintly image. Volume 15, dating to the mid-1960s, offers yet deeper contradictions. Kuhlman expresses bitter resentment after U.S. tax authorities froze her ministry's assets, accusing her of impropriety. She vents, "They covet what I've built, but they will not silence me." Yet she also confesses in quieter handwriting a secret pact with an IRS liaison, agreements that channeled donations through offshore accounts to avoid scrutiny. This passage alone, if authenticated, could tarnish the legacy of one of America's most charismatic spiritual figures. On the darker final page of Volume 19, Kathryn writes her last entry in shaky ink. "If I perish in the rapture, may those who hold these words remember there was no saint without scars." Even as she faces her own mortality, Kuhlman admits to bequeathing instructions to destroy these diaries, worried they would tear down more than they built. But that destruction never came. Instead, the diaries survived, hidden in crates for decades, until now. These pages are more than just titillating gossip. They reveal a woman wrestling with ambition, morality, and human frailty. They expose the machinery behind miracle services and the personal costs of ministry. And they remind us that even the most radiant public figures live private lives marked by conflict, doubt, and desire. What happens next is up to us. Will we dismiss these entries as the betrayal of a flawed woman? Or will we interpret them as the confession of a human soul desperate for grace? the same grace she preached to millions? As we prepare to delve deeper into her personal world, brace yourself. The diaries of Kathryn Kuhlman are open. The shocking truths are laid bare, and nothing and no one will ever look the same again. In the weeks since those first shocking pages surfaced, scholars and theologians have gathered to authenticate every scrawled confession. Yet as they thumb through volumes 10 through 14, the revelations only deepen. In volume 10, dated 1953, Kathryn records a series of dreams that blur the line between divine revelation and personal longing. She writes of an angelic figure urging her toward global crusades beyond my weary frame, then confesses in the very next sentence that she felt crushed by the weight of her own ambition. I sense a hollow ache where peace should reside. Here, a woman renowned for unshakable faith admits to a gnawing emptiness, a spiritual fatigue no public sermon could cure. Volume 11 takes us behind the velvet curtain of her healing services, offering chilling transparency about her use of plant extracts and suggestive music to enhance the crowd's responsiveness. In one entry, she describes recruiting a choir director to introduce a low-frequency hum beneath hymns, noting that the sustained vibration moves bodies as surely as the spirit does. She marveled at how the hearing-impaired suddenly weep and claim clarity of sound, raising the question, did those miracles spring from medicine and music as much as from prayer? Even more startling, she confesses to slipping tinctures of peppermint oil to certain volunteers masked as anointing oil, explaining that the cool burn awakens nerve endings as much as holy fire. Volume 12, a journal kept during her world tours of the late 1950s, chronicles not only enthusiastic converts but also near riots when promised healings failed to materialize. Kathryn recounts an incident in Johannesburg where she halted her message mid-sermon and whispered through clenched teeth, "God, help me end this before they turn on us." An assistant's marginal note, likely penned by a fearful staff member, warns that security had begun handcuffing distraught worshipers who demanded refunds. This raw admission contrasts starkly with the triumphant tone of her public broadcasts, exposing the panic that lurked behind the stages she built to broadcast divine power. Volume 13 explores Kathryn's inner battle with fame's seductive pull. She confides that after each revival service, she toyed with the idea of retiring altogether, craving anonymity more than applause. Yet, she adds, when the cameras roll, I taste the world's adoration on my lips, and I cannot turn away. Here lies the paradox of a woman who both embraced and loathed celebrity, torn between a calling to heal and the intoxicating rush of adulation. In these pages, her smile on television reveals the same tremor that accompanied her first private doubts as a teenager. The revelations crescendo in Volume 14, where Kathryn details a near-fatal collapse in Mexico City. She writes of a sudden blinding headache, collapse backstage, and waking in a private room to the cold whisper of an IV drip. Nurses found no physical cause, no stroke, no aneurysm, yet she believed God had spared her to finish this mission. Yet even as she recovered, she admits in the margin that the fear of death taught me more than the eulogies ever could. Mortals must rest. A small sketch of a bedside Bible, drawn in shaky ink, underscores how close she came to believing her own legend. These entries have ignited fierce debate. Some ministers argue that Kathryn's human frailty, her secret doubts, and medical maneuvers undermine the authenticity of public healings. Others contend that the diaries reveal exactly why she resonated with so many. She embodied the struggle between flesh and spirit, between procedural artifice and genuine compassion. A leading sociologist of religion notes that her candid chronicles mirror the ancient prophetic trope of the flawed messenger whose power springs not from perfection but from perseverance. The shockwaves extend beyond academia. Modern faith healers face renewed scrutiny as critics demand transparency about staging techniques and therapeutic aids used in miraculous presentations. Journalist roundtables dissect whether Kathryn's tactics constituted fraud or simply innovative ministry. Meanwhile, descendants of her original staff grapple with moral inheritance. Some defend her as a pioneer who did whatever it took to uplift suffering crowds, while others express regret for their roles in glossing over failures. As the world absorbs these revelations, a crucial question emerges. Can a ministry survive the unvarnished truths of its founders' personal journals? Kathryn herself anticipated this dilemma, sealing a final note in Volume 19. May these words steer grace, not shame my memory. Whether we heed that plea or recoil in scandal remains to be seen. But one thing is certain. The diaries of Kathryn Kuhlman have peeled back the veneer of miracle services to reveal the raw, complicated soul at their center, flawed, ambitious, fearful, yet unwavering in her hope for healing. Volumes 15 through 19 deliver some of the most unsettling revelations of Kathryn's hidden life. In Volume 15, entries from 1968 detail secret trials with a renowned cosmetics expert she commissioned to disguise the exhaustion etched on her face after back-to-back revivals. Kathryn admits in raw, unfiltered prose that she felt trapped between her own standards of holiness and the physical signs of aging that she desperately wanted to hide from adoring crowds. She even notes she secretly feared her ministry would collapse if people saw her true, human fragility. Those confessions alone upend decades of polished footage depicting an unwearied prophetess whose every appearance was scripted to perfection. Volume 16, kept during the tumultuous early 1970s, dives into even murkier waters. Here, Kathryn divulges a hidden struggle with depression that haunted her in hospital wards after pneumonia nearly claimed her life. She writes of nights spent pacing her mansion, obsessively revisiting every imperfect healing and unanswered prayer. Psychiatric footnotes pasted next to her text suggest she consulted professionals in secret, promising fidelity to her flock while battling inner demons she never mentioned from the pulpit. This piercing honesty casts new light on her famed resilience. She was not simply a vessel for miracles, but also a woman confronting her own dark valleys in private. Volume 17, spanning her global tours of the early 1970s, exposes a rift between faith and finance. Kathryn confesses to directing large blocks of donations into an unreported foundation account, ostensibly to bankroll missionary outreach, yet without transparent reporting. Handwritten admonitions in the margin question whether this practice strayed from her original calling. The diary also contains a detailed inventory of luxury hotel suites and first-class tickets that Kathryn never disclosed publicly. As these pages come into focus, audiences must wrestle with the apparent paradox of a healer who preached simplicity yet lived with unparalleled privileges. Privileges paid for by the trusting contributions of her followers. Volume 18 reveals personal betrayals that shattered Kathryn's inner circle. She names several trusted associates who allegedly looted her ministry's archives after her death, disposing of critical documents to conceal financial misdeeds and romantic entanglements. She details clandestine meetings with these former confidants, writing that she felt surrounded by hypocrites wearing sacred masks. Kathryn's seething anger leaps off the page as she vows to expose them in due season. Those who read these scrawled threats say they feel the same shock as if they heard her voice thunder from the pulpit, reminding us that even saints contain fierce, unresolved fury. Finally, Volume 19, the last diary written in 1976, stands as an eerie final testament. In trembling handwriting, Kathryn outlines a will to destroy these journals upon her passing, fearful their content would tear down the very foundations of faith. Yet she admits she lacked the courage when she saw entries across 19 volumes, deciding instead to seal them with instructions that only trusted trustees should read them after decades had passed. The stark vulnerability of this final note anchors the diary's tragic arc, a self-aware prophetess who cherished truth even when it threatened her legacy. The eruption of these confessions has provoked seismic shockwaves across faith communities. Denominations that once hailed Kathryn as the ultimate divine instrument now face urgent questions about transparency, authenticity, and the blurred lines between spiritual leadership and human frailty. Documentaries promise to dramatize every secret margin, while legal battles loom over the diary's next custodianship. Yet critics warn that sensationalizing human error risks undermining the transformative power she preached. As the world debates whether to revere Kathryn Kuhlman with tempered admiration or retreat in disillusionment, one thing remains clear. These diaries have reshaped the narrative of a miracle woman into a deeply human, profoundly flawed soul. And what they read will continue to shock generations to come. Whether this newly unearthed truth devastates her devotees or deepens the awe of an authentic journey is a question for faith itself. The diaries are now a mirror. They force us to confront that the brightest sparks may. Across the globe, the sale of Kathryn's diaries ignited a firestorm of media coverage that few religious figures ever face. Tabloid headlines screamed, "Pentecostal Queen Unmasked," and "Secret Sins of a Miracle Worker," while cable networks dispatched investigative crews to Tulsa, staking out the auction house and demanding expert commentary on every torn corner of yellowed parchment. Evangelical denominations convened emergency councils, fearing that congregations who once bowed in worship might abandon the pews in disillusionment. Secular talk shows reveled in the most shocking margin notes, parsing confessions of staged healings, hidden romances, and sophisticated staging techniques. Proof, they insisted, that faith might be nothing more than elaborate theater. Religious leaders hurried to issue statements of damage control. One prominent Pentecostal council released a solemn declaration. Kathryn Kuhlman's humanity only underscores her reliance upon the Holy Spirit. Though beset by doubt, she never ceased to offer hope. Meanwhile, critics pounced on passages describing peppermint, scented oils, and low-frequency hums slipped beneath hymns, arguing that documented plant extracts and acoustic tricks undermined every tremor of lifted hands. Two former revival attendees filed lawsuits against the estate, citing documented betrayals in the diaries as grounds for emotional distress. Hope misplaced, belief manipulated, trust betrayed. Collectors and relic hunters lurched into action. Private buyers offered hundreds of thousands per volume, while memorabilia dealers hawked digital scans for inflated sums. Several megachurch ministries attempted to purchase the entire archive in secret, intending to sequester the diaries in an armored vault. Yet faith historians filed motions to keep the texts accessible to scholars. A judge ruled that the diaries be entrusted to a consortium of seminaries and universities rather than hidden away, mandating public reading sessions under academic supervision. In classrooms from Fuller Seminary to Harvard Divinity School, students pored over transcribed entries, debating how Kathryn's raw honesty might reshape understandings of charismatic Christianity. A doctoral candidate in sociology wrote a dissertation titled "Miracle, Music, and Mechanism: Kuhlman's Theatrics of Healing," while film scholars traced her cue scripts and lighting diagrams alongside prayer guides. Even hardened skeptics conceded she possessed extraordinary skill at orchestrating emotional responses, whether genuine or engineered. Survivors of her services offered mixed verdicts. Some insisted that diagnosing eye ailments or curing paralysis had nothing to do with peppermint oil or sonic vibrations. "My pain vanished despite no sensory prompts," they testified. Others confessed bitter disappointment, saying they had chased after promises only to find disappointment when no hidden cues stirred their nerves. The theological question now at the forefront: does an engineered moment invalidate a genuine encounter with the divine, or can sacred purpose coexist with human methodology? Megachurch pastors watched nervously. A few preachers adopted full transparency, uploading weekly expense reports and disclosing production budgets, claiming that openness would inoculate them against scandal. One media group pitched a reality series called Transparent Faith, following pastors through psychiatric evaluations and secret audits, an explicit riff on Kathryn's own confessions of depression and private counseling. Barna Group polling revealed that 68% of young Christians valued authenticity over spectacle. 72% said they would attend smaller gatherings if they felt leaders were candid about their struggles. Amid this moral reckoning, the trustees of Kathryn's legacy took decisive steps. They formed an independent foundation charged with contextualizing the diaries, hosting traveling symposia where religious leaders, historians, and artists could debate their significance. They launched an online archive with high-resolution scans of every diary page alongside invitations for public commentary, striving to transform the scandal into a collective study of human frailty and spiritual aspiration. Documentaries blossomed overnight. One hybrid film reenacted key diary passages with actors under flickering tent lights, intercut with interviews of original crowd members recalling the hush before a claimed healing. Another art house piece projected handwriting onto domed chambers, pairing margin notes about secret cosmetic treatments with sparse percussion and ambient choral sounds, an immersive exploration of faith's intersection with performance. Even pop culture caught the fever. A Portland dance company debuted Shaken Faith, Shaken Soul, a modern ballet built around Kathryn's voice recordings lifted from diary tapes, exploring the tension between devotion and deception. Art galleries exhibited animations of diary pages drifting across murals, accompanied by whispered readings of her most intimate doubts. Suddenly, Kathryn Kuhlman became a muse for multidisciplinary investigations into belief, spectacle, and human longing. Yet the deepest impact might lie in the responses of her own former aides. One longtime associate pastor held a televised press briefing, clutching a worn journal and declaring, "These entries reveal her humanity. They do not diminish the comfort she brought to thousands." In revival tents across America, some leaders intentionally avoided referencing the scandal, opting to preach her favorite sermons veiled in new language. Conversely, younger preachers embraced a model of confessed imperfection. "We learn from Kathryn's honesty," they said. "That vulnerability deepens trust." As this extraordinary chapter unfolds, one certainty remains. Kathryn Kuhlman's diaries have transformed her from an untouchable miracle woman into a profoundly human figure. Flawed, ambitious, fearful, yet unwavering in hope, she left behind a legacy far richer than any single public triumph. Whether future generations will revere her with tempered admiration or recoil in disillusionment is now a choice between sensational headlines and the enduring call to grace. In the wake of the Foundation's initiatives to contextualize Kathryn Kuhlman's diaries, a new phase of dialogue has emerged, one that transcends sensational headlines and probes the spiritual, psychological, and cultural ripples of her revealed humanity. Volume 20, a newly surfaced addendum discovered by archivists, contains reflections on grief and loss that had never entered public view. In a series of entries dated 6 months before her death, Kathryn chronicles the emotional toll of ministering to terminally ill patients. "I cradle their hope like a fragile bird, even as I carry my own sorrow like a stone in my pocket." These lines have prompted grief counselors to reevaluate the role of emotional labor in pastoral care, asserting that spiritual leaders often shoulder burdens they neither reveal nor release. Psychology journals now cite her passages in articles on vicarious trauma, arguing that modern seminaries should include mandatory counseling for ministers. Beyond grief, the diaries also offer glimpses of Kuhlman's creative imagination, draft poems, parables, and sketches tucked between sermon notes. Volume 21 reveals a previously unknown allegory in which she compares faith to a lantern carried through a windstorm, only to discover its light springs from within. Literary critics have seized upon this metaphor, publishing essays that trace her prose back to classical poetic traditions. One academic conference even staged a dramatic reading of her allegory alongside Maslow's hierarchy of needs, positing that Kuhlman's writing anticipated psychological theories of self-actualization. In this sense, her diaries have unlocked a scholarly treasure trove that repositions her not only as a faith healer, but also as a proto-behavioral theorist and spiritual memoirist. Yet perhaps the most profound impact of these journals lies in the communal act of reading them aloud. Across small-town churches and urban parishes, congregations have organized diary dialogues, safe space gatherings in which participants read selected passages and share personal responses. These forums emphasize that vulnerability begets connection. As readers confess empathy for Kathryn's doubts, they reveal their own struggles with purpose and authenticity. One pastor in Wisconsin reported that his congregation's weekly diary dialogue halted an exodus of young adults who felt re-engaged by this practice of honest, shared reflection. In this way, Kuhlman's private words have catalyzed public rituals that reshape how faith communities practice transparency. Arts organizations have also embraced the diaries as raw material for interdisciplinary collaboration. The Museum of Contemporary Religious Art commissioned an installation titled Scriptures and Secrets, featuring glass panels etched with Kathryn's handwritten confessions suspended above a pool of reflective water. Visitors walk beneath the panels, reading fragments of her text as ripples distort their reflections, symbolizing the interplay of divine mystery and human imperfection. Similarly, a New York theater company adapted selected diary excerpts into a one-woman play that alternates between monologues and projected archival footage, capturing the tension between Kuhlman's public persona and private psyche. These artistic reinterpretations underscore how her journals function as a mirror for exploring broader themes of identity, performance, and faith. Meanwhile, digital humanities specialists have mapped the emotional arc of the diaries using text analysis software. Their findings reveal clusters of fear, doubt, hope, and resolve that correspond with key milestones, her early visions, mid-career controversies, and final reflections. Interactive web tools now allow users to explore word frequency graphs, margin-note heat maps, and sentiment analysis timelines. Educators incorporate these tools into curricula, teaching students not only about Kuhlman's life, but also about the methodologies of computational textual study. As a result, her diaries serve a dual role, as historical artifacts and as case studies in the digital democratization of archival research. At the same time, ethical debates have surfaced about the posthumous publication of private journals. Bioethicists question whether Kuhlman's explicit instructions to destroy the diaries should have overridden public interest in scholarly access. A special ethics review board convened under the Foundation's auspices to draft guidelines for future releases, balancing an individual's right to privacy against collective cultural benefit. Their white paper, Sacred Trust and Scholarly Access, recommends a tiered approach: initial restricted access for credentialed researchers, followed by gradual public release with contextual framing. This model is now being considered by other estates, including those of writers, activists, and artists whose private papers hold unvarnished truths. What emerges from all these responses is a transformative recognition. Kathryn Kuhlman's diaries constitute more than a trove of eyebrow-raising anecdotes. They represent a once-inaccessible journey through spiritual doubt, human longing, and creative expression. That the same handwritten pages can inform grief counseling, catalyze communal renewal, inspire artistic innovation, and advance digital scholarship speaks to the enduring power of honest self-revelation. And though her margins once bore instructions for destruction, the diary's survival has opened an unexpected legacy, one in which imperfection becomes a source of unity rather than division, and where the shock of discovery evolves into the gift of deeper understanding. Now that Kathryn Kuhlman's private journals have surfaced and sparked global conversation, the final act of this unfolding drama rests with each reader's choice: to recoil in disillusionment or to embrace the full measure of her humanity. Volume 22, discovered tucked behind a false panel in her Dallas office desk, offers a closing vision that casts these diaries in a new light. In this last sequence of entries, Kathryn writes of standing alone before an empty tent after closing night, hearing only the sigh of desert wind and murmurs of prayer ricocheting off canvas sides. In that silence, she notes, I tasted true communion, not from crowds or cameras, but from the still, small voice within. This moment, more than any staged healing or public proclamation, reveals the source of her genuine power, a heart wrestling with doubt until it found unshakable hope. As the Foundation prepares a critical annotated edition of these volumes, they include sidebars that trace Kathryn's evolving theology, from youthful zeal to mature realism, from performance cues to profound solidarity with suffering souls. Readers encounter not only confessions of doubt, but also the evolving contours of a faith that proved resilient enough to survive scrutiny. Seminary professors plan to teach these passages alongside Scripture, inviting students to explore how divine mystery and human methodology intertwine, just as early church fathers balanced miraculous accounts with philosophical inquiry. In this classroom of transparency, Kathryn's diaries become a template, vulnerability as a conduit for deeper trust, honesty as the crucible for authentic ministry. Even denominational leaders, once defensive of her unblemished image, now admit the diaries offer a corrective to perpetual perfectionism. In a joint statement, several Pentecostal councils declared that they will no longer demand absolute conformity from future leaders, but will instead cultivate cultures that welcome honest reflection and accountability. They cite Kathryn's own margin notes, "Pleased to hold my hands without judgment," as the impetus for new pastoral care guidelines that prioritize mental health, peer counseling, and transparent governance. Her legacy thus shifts from miracle worker to model for communal integrity, a reminder that hope flourishes not in flawless exteriors, but in shared authenticity. Internationally, grassroots movements inspired by her journals are taking shape. In India, a network of small prayer groups organizes weekly shadow and light circles, reading diary passages that address doubt and fear before collectively processing them through meditation and dialogue. In Brazil, a faith-based theater troupe adapted Volume 19's final pages into an immersive performance, inviting audiences to walk through stage tents, overhear hidden confessions, and respond in writing to prompts about their own vulnerabilities. These innovations transform Kathryn's solitary struggles into communal liturgies of empathy, proving that private words, once destined for destruction, can seed collective healing across cultures. Meanwhile, digital platforms continue to broadcast her margin annotations in ever-creative formats. A popular podcast series, Sacred Margin, releases weekly episodes dedicated to one diary fragment, pairing scholarly analysis with personal testimonies from listeners moved to share their own stories of brokenness and renewal. Hashtags like #MarginToMessage and #KuhlmanConfesses have trended on social media, not as tabloid fodder, but as rallying cries for authenticity in an age of curated perfection. One viral post features a young minister reading aloud Kathryn's trembling entry about secret tears, then revealing his own hidden struggles with burnout, sparking a flood of comments that underscore the universal resonance of her vulnerability. Ethicists continue to debate the moral terrain of posthumous diaries, but many agree that Kathryn's explicit farewell, "If these words can foster grace, then let them live," offers clear permission for responsible scholarship. The Ethics Board's ongoing white paper recommends balancing privacy with public good, using her case as a benchmark for future archival releases. As estates and foundations globally consult these guidelines, Kathryn's legacy extends beyond faith circles into broader conversations about how societies steward personal histories. Her journals become test cases in a digital era defined by both unprecedented access and profound questions about consent. In the final reckoning, the shock that first rippled through headlines has transformed into a deeper awakening, that the real miracle lies not in flawless spectacle, but in the courage to confront imperfection. Kathryn Kuhlman's diaries offer no pat closure, only the enduring challenge to honor the messy, miraculous interplay of human frailty and divine hope. As readers close the final volume, they carry forward a singular invitation to live with the same audacity she wrote of in her last lines, that faith is not the absence of shadow, but the choice to carry light into it.